And now a real stunner. A 15-year-old sexually molested in her bed in an intensive care unit. How does that happen? Senior investigative reporter Steve Andrews has looked into this story for 3 months now. He's here tonight with his findings of patient sexually molested in ICU. It's truly unbelievable.
You know, people go to hospitals to get well, not sexually molested, but sadly that is what happened to a 15-year-old girl. Tonight, you will hear a grieving mother, hear a molester's confession, and I'll show you a hospital exec who just doesn't want to talk about any of it. The mother wants an apology and accountability. The hospital and its attorneys blame what happened on the 15-year-old and her mother. We've given the mom and her daughter aliases to protect their identities.
I get angry because not only did you not protect my daughter, but then you're going to try to blame it on a 15-year-old who is in your ICU.
We will call her Michelle. She is filled with heartbreak, shock, and outrage. Against her orders on a July night in 2012, nurses at Highlands Regional Medical Center allowed 16-year-old Jessie Maness into the intensive care unit to visit her daughter, we'll call Jenny.
But I said if under no circumstances is this person allowed in, he's trouble.
Michelle wasn't just a mom, she was also chief nursing officer at the hospital. The next morning when she showed up at ICU, a nurse pulled her aside and told her Maness, Jenny's on-again, off-again boyfriend, with whom she was sexually involved, had indeed been allowed in Jenny's room. Nurses later caught him in Jenny's bed, not once, but twice. Then, the jaw-dropping news.
She said, I don't know how to tell you this. I hope it's nothing, but I found this on the floor in your daughter's room. And it was an open condom wrapper.
But Michelle had yet to learn the worst. Weeks later, she confirmed Maness had sexual intercourse with her daughter that night in July, while Jenny lay in her bed under the influence of multiple painkillers and sedatives, including morphine and Percocet.
You know, why did they let him in? Why did they let him in and let him close the door? Why did they find him in the bed and yet let it happen again? How long was he allowed in there?
All questions Michelle has asked for nearly 2 years. Questions the man in the yellow tie isn't answering. He is Brian Hess, CEO of Highlands Regional at the time Michelle's daughter was molested. Mr. Yellow Tie wanted no part of us, our camera, or my questions. Instead, he hid behind his lawyers when approached.
Are you recording?
Yeah, the camera's right there. Yeah.
No, we don't have any comment, thank you.
Can you tell me how it is that a 15-year-old was sexually assaulted in your hospital, in your ICU unit? Hess just walked away. Prosecutors did not. They charged Maness with lewd and lascivious behavior with a minor and molestation of a child. In this recorded interview with a Highlands County Sheriff's investigator obtained by 8 on Your Side, Maness abruptly confessed.
Can you tell me what happened when she was in the hospital?
Yeah, sir.
Okay. Did she act any different to you when she was in the hospital?
Yeah, she acted normal to me. I mean, like, she was tired a lot.
Michelle set her sights on the hospital. She sued Highlands Regional and its parent company for negligence. You remember the guy in the yellow tie didn't want to talk to me in person about the lawsuit. So I reached out again by phone. I'm looking for Mr. Hess, please. During the last 9 weeks, I've reviewed law enforcement reports as well as hundreds of pages of documents related to Michelle's lawsuit. The suit claims, despite explicit instructions, ICU employees permitted Maness to enter Jenny's room, where they observed him in bed with her. And while Jenny was heavily sedated, Maness had non-consensual sexual intercourse with her. Court records also show the hospital and its attorney, Barbara Flanagan, deny any liability. They blame Jenny and her mother for what happened. The hospital claims mother and daughter's negligence was the sole or contributing cause of Jenny's injuries. I've read your responses to the lawsuit, and it indicates that the mother was negligent. Can you explain that? And who are you? Who are you?
I'm representing the hospital. We have no comment.
This isn't just any attorney. She is Barbara Flanagan, the lawyer who laid the blame for the incident in ICU on the victim and her mother.
I didn't know or expect her to not be safe there. And you can't fix it.
This just flies in the face of what we expect from a hospital, such as providing patients a safe environment and protecting them from harm. Juvenile court sentenced Maness to probation, ordered him to perform community service and into sex offender treatment. Now, Michelle and Jenny have moved away from Highlands County to escape this ugly incident and try to start anew.
Well, I mean, the incident itself is bad enough.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to figure out now, so to add insult to injury, how is it that they're blaming the mother and the girl? How is this somehow their fault?
You heard me. That's a great question that neither the attorney nor the hospital wanted to answer. They just decided, hey, we're not going to answer this at all, and walked away. Listen, this ICU unit is a locked unit. They had to buzz Maness in, and they did. The hospital's current ICU visiting policy is immediate family only. Even if Jenny had let it happen, a 15-year-old cannot legally consent to sex, especially one on morphine and Percocet. And, oh, here's a little something interesting. The hospital sent a letter to Mom saying it found no evidence that her daughter was abused 7 months after the molester confessed.
He confessed. Well, here's a surprise. Highlands Regional Medical Center and its attorneys are upset that we're asking questions about how a 15-year-old girl was sexually molested in its intensive care unit. Last week, 8 on Your Side senior investigative reporter Steve Andrews exposed this ugly incident, and tonight, Steve is back to tell us about an attempt to keep all the details under wraps.
Yeah, Highlands Regional Medical Center and its attorney just don't want you to know what happened in ICU. So its attorney is asking a judge to limit what the mother of the victim can say about this case. This after I paid the hospital's attorney and former CEO a little visit earlier this month. You see the lady with the sunglasses on top of her head? She didn't want to tell me who she is. And who are you? Who are you?
I'm representing the hospital. We have no comment.
Her name is Barbara Flanagan. She represents Highlands Regional Medical Center in what's turning into a nasty lawsuit. She's asking a judge to keep the media away. Why? Well, let's back up for a minute. This mom, who we'll call Michelle, and her daughter are suing the hospital for negligence. In July 2012, according to the lawsuit, Michelle instructed the ICU staff to not allow her daughter's boyfriend, 16-year-old Jesse Maness, in to visit her. They did. The next morning, a nurse delivered stunning news.
She said, I don't know how to tell you this. I hope it's nothing, but I found this on the floor in your daughter's room. And it was an open condom wrapper.
Maness later confessed to having sex in the ICU with Michelle's daughter. The lawsuit says the girl was heavily medicated and sedated. And even if it was consensual, a 15-year-old cannot legally consent to sex. Despite the confession, Flanagan and the hospital denied the allegations. In fact, Flanagan wrote that if sex in the ICU occurred, the 15-year-old and her mother were guilty of negligence. I wanted to hear an explanation about that. I've read your responses to the lawsuit, and it indicates that the mother was negligent. Can you explain that? Flanagan didn't have much to say to me, but later that day, she had a lot to say to a judge. She filed an emergency motion for a protective order claiming that as she and the former hospital CEO exited an elevator, they were accosted by a reporter from WFLA-TV News Channel 8. She wants the judge to stop the mom and her attorney from speaking with us. Accosted? Well, this is nothing more than a heavy-handed attempt by the hospital's attorney to slap the mother for speaking to me and to keep information about what happened in the ICU out of the public. Now, a judge will hold a hearing on this attempt to limit all the information later in May.
Unanswered questions remain tonight about the molestation of a 15-year-old in a Bay Area hospital's intensive care unit. Highlands Regional Medical Center claims it found no evidence that anything happened. 8 on Your Side senior investigative reporter Steve Andrews has dug into this story for nearly 4 months. And tonight, Steve tells us about some of the holes in the hospital's investigation.
Gail, 4 weeks ago, I told you about a girl that we called Jenny, 15-year-old girl we called Jenny. Against her mother's instructions, Highland Regional Medical Center ICU staff allowed Jenny's boyfriend in to see her. That boyfriend later confessed to having sex with the girl in her ICU bed. The hospital claims it conducted an in-depth investigation into all of this. Tonight, I'll show you where that investigation missed the mark. And once again, we've changed the names of family members to protect their identities. Any way you look at it, Highlands Regional Medical Center story just doesn't add up.
The investigation's closed.
The hospital's risk manager wrote Jenny's mother, who we'll call Michelle, that the hospital's in-depth internal investigation found no evidence of abuse during Jenny's stay. University of South Florida Vice President of Health, Dr. Jay Wolfson, believes a thorough investigation involving such a serious allegation includes reviewing hospital records and conducting interviews.
It would interview those parties directly affected who had direct evidence.
That did not happen. We've learned the hospital did not interview Jenny or her mother about the molestation. Wilson thinks that's an issue.
That would have been a breach in the risk management process because that's part of the evidentiary chain.
Another problem is what's in this letter to Michelle. The hospital wrote, your concerns were reported to local law enforcement. Well, Michelle reported the incident. The Sebring Police Department and the Highlands County Sheriff's Office tell me the hospital didn't.
Molestation is a crime, period. It likely should have been reported to the law enforcement agency, whether the Sheriff's Department or the police.
The hospital also put in its letter Michelle's concerns were reported to the state of Florida's regulatory agency. That would be the Agency for Healthcare Administration, or ACA.
We actually do not have any record that this incident was reported to us.
ACA is very aware of the ICU molestation.
The hospital says it's her fault.
Because of our reports and questions, not because of the hospital. ACA's Polly Weaver says the state will now make an unannounced visit to Highlands Regional to take a close look at its investigative process.
If there was a lack of follow-through on the part of the risk management investigation, that would tell us that we have issues that we need to look deeper in the risk management program.
The state wants to know what action the hospital took to make sure something like this never happens again.
The hospital, under all circumstances, had an obligation to protect the child from the intrusion of any visitor, and especially a sexual intruder.
Jenny and her mom are suing the hospital for negligence. In its answer to the lawsuit, Highlands Regional denies that anything occurred in its ICU and claims that if something did happen, it's due to the negligence of the victim and her mother. Now, even if Jenny had allowed this to happen, it is in Florida, a 15-year-old cannot legally consent to sex.
But what about the hospital? I mean, I'm just guessing that they're required to report if molestation happens there, right?
Hospitals must report to the state any adverse incidents affecting a patient. But interestingly, the state does not require sexual molestation does not list sexual molestation of a child or a minor in a hospital as an adverse incident.
Well, they may want to review that.